I'm Stuart Ross. I wear a lot of hats. Tour manager, tour accountant, festival producer, personal manager, agent. Is there anything left? I'm not a promoter.
Not a promoter. Never been a promoter.
Not
well,
really.
You kind of
no.
were.
Well, when you're a festival producer, you're essentially a promoter.
Yes.
But I was never the guy who would call an agent and make an offer on talent and put them into a building and try and make money off of it.
All right. See, that's why we're going to start off with. That's why Stuart's one of the